now as we move into South America, again, focusing a lot on our geographic features and how that has influenced human geography in this area, and then talking a good bit about urban development of South Americans. So what the focus was during colonization and how that has now impacted that urban development, and then how you would actually describe modern South America development. All right, so first of all, South America, not a huge number of countries in this area compared especially to Europe, which is a smaller kind of area, but lots more countries. But again, some of the larger ones, of course, being Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela has seen a lot of kind of conflict and controversy politically. But we also have Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, Uruguay, Chile off to the west coast, and again, a few other countries up the top. Also, in case any of you are kind of science or biology majors or fans, so the Galapagos Islands, which is actually part of Ecuador, but off, of course, to the west coast. So the Galapagos Islands is where Charles Darwin done a lot of his work on evolution. So that's kind of to put that in perspective for you. All right, so if we look first at that geological activity, thinking about our tectonic plates. So unlike Middle America that had a lot of kind of meeting of these plate boundaries, South America is similar to North America. So, along the west coast, it's on that plate boundary, so some geological activity, but the majority of the land is not over a plate boundary, so it is not going to be very active. All right, so the again, large mountains are going to come, especially on the west coast where that plate boundary is, but volcanoes are also common in this area, again, due to that plate boundary. All right, so if we look, for example, so the Andes Mountains, again, thinking about that boundary of the plate, tectonic plates. So we have the Andes Mountains that go essentially along the entire west coast of South America due to that tectonic plate activity. So this is the largest mountain range, and then there are mountains that come off of this. So it provides that altitudinal zonation that we talked about with Middle and Central America, that provides a variety of crops and resources that can be available. Then kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, there's also desert. So the Atacama Desert, which is also kind of in that area, but they're at the lowlands, and still some mountainous. We usually think about deserts as being just all sand, but this desert region does have some elevation within it, but it is very hot and especially very dry. So again, not all deserts are hot deserts. Even snow can be seen on these. So again, it's just kind of the absence of precipitation that indicates it as a desert. Next is our Altiplano. This is actually one of the highest plateaus on Earth outside of Tibet. So it's a very large and extensive area. There is a lot of drainage in this area. There's some active volcanoes. There is a very high elevation, but there's a lot of economic activity, so different mining, llamas, herding, and agriculture use that's here as well, and a lot of human activity and population in these areas. So then the Amazon River Basin. So the Amazon rainforest, definitely the largest of the rainforests, which has a huge impact on our climate, unfortunately being destroyed by deforestation and climate change that is leading to a loss of that Amazon river, but also along this basin. So the Amazon river has and Amazon rainforest has the most diverse population on Earth. So the largest variety of plants and animals, so huge biodiversity in this area. Of course, a lot of agriculture due to the humid temperatures. Again, lots of water, so you can see it just looks like kind of a root system here with all of the rivers and all of the water that is in this area due to this Amazon River basin. So very important. Not a lot of inhabitants here as far as like cities, but hugely important to resources and to the health of South America as well as globally. Then we have Patagonia. In this area, of course, down in the southern part of South America at the very tip. So again, this is very important to colonialization. A lot of indigenous tribes, though, and indigenous people are from this area or part of this area. This does have a very diverse geographic environment as far as there are mountains, there are lakes, rainforest here, there are glaciers, deserts. So it does have a lot of variation. So of course that leads to a lot of diversity as far as the resources that are available. Then in Llanos, going to the other opposite end, so you're in the northern part into Colombia and Venezuela. So this has a vast tropical grassland plain. So again, thinking about lots of resources as far as grazing, but also grasslands. We don't see a lot necessarily in this picture, but a lot of grasslands here that provide a lot of tropical and subtropical rainforests. We have savannas like we see more here, so shrublands. So again, very important to the resources of this region. And then the Atlantic forest. So as the name implies, again, our forest area is more like what we're used to in the United States. So again, lots of diversity here, but kind of a typical kind of thinking about deciduous trees. This is where those would be found in this Atlantic rainforest. And then in the Pampas, this is actually one of the actually world's most productive agriculture areas, most populous region, so lots of people, of course, then live there. But again, we think about all the agriculture that can be grown here, so various crops, so very fertile soil, so kind of like the Midwest or Middle America for us. All right, so now moving away from that geographical features and talking more about the civilizations and colonializations. So we talked about the Mayans and the Aztecs in Middle America. So in South America, we have the Inca Empire and a video that you can watch about them. So the green area here shows the greatest. So it's the biggest that it ever was, which was around the 13th century through about 1572. This was the largest the empire was. So it's used very innovative agricultural practices, so terrace farming, to where even on steep land, they would kind of flatten it. It looks like stair steps that would allow that steep land to actually produce crops. Highly regarded agriculture or architecture and stone masonry is what this empire was really known for. So also this huge road system that they had that extended, so it actually had 40,000 miles of a road system. And again, thinking about this time period, that was massive. And then Francisco Pizarro was the Spanish conquistador or conqueror who actually destroyed or conquered the Inca Empire. And this is just showing the terrace farming. So again, very steep land here, but they kind of make stair steps and it flattens off part of that so that it can actually be used for agriculture. And then just some of the stone masonry that was popular in this area. And finally, some of the architecture that was here in that stone masonry that this area was known for. And this is just showing where that area is, again, along that empire that stretched kind of down through here and that huge roadway system that goes at 40,000 miles. And then this, just showing some of their other innovations here, this footbridge that connects across this canal that we see here. All right, so now if we look at this European colonization, so of course after the Incas, then Europe, of course, and the Spanish conquistador came in. So Portugal and Spain were colonized, actually colonized most of South America. As you can see here, Portugal more on the east side, which is present-day Brazil, and Spain more on the western side. A few others involved up here. So the UK, Netherlands, and France also kind of expanded out of that rim land that we talked about from the Caribbean islands and Middle America, kind of extended a little bit into South America, but not to the extent of Portugal or Spain. And then again, we can see down here in southern South America, it really did not become colonized. So again, more of the indigenous tribes and people remain today in this area. So just a quote here from your text. So the land was taken from the indigenous groups, transformed to the benefit of colonial interest. So the main interest of conquering their group was to extract the riches with little thought given to fostering local development or regional connectivity. So they weren't there trying to inhabit the land, trying to grow or foster relationships. They were just essentially there to use their resources and get what they need. So as a result, many of the rural areas today are very isolated. So they did not kind of commingle. And these are often some of the poorest in the country. And again, a lot of populations of indigenous people, because again, they did not kind of coexist. They were very separate. Were not interested in trying to have any relationship at all. All right, so kind of wrapping up this chapter, talking about urban development. A link here about the model of Latin American city that's interesting. But then in the Spanish territories, the cities were built according to guidelines called the Law of the Indies, and this mandated everything from the treatment of the Indians to the width of the street. So everything was very dictated, and it set up kind of what we see here to the right. So we have this kind of market here in the middle, or in this kind of center, and then we have this spine region that comes out into a mall area. And then we start disseminating out. So the poorest being out on the outside, the wealthiest more here in the middle. So if we look at the CBD, which is this area here, so this is the central business district, so kind of our downtown area. This is where the markets would be, in the most accessible area in the city. So then in the spine area that we have here, this is kind of the mall that would connect the elite residential section that's down here to that business district. So this is the most expensive kind of upscale housing, but that spine is what would connect those two regions or parts. Then we have different zones. So we have the zone of maturity. So these are the nicer residential areas, kind of our middle upper class, different city services like roads, public transportations, drinking water, etc. Then we have the in situ accretion, and this is kind of that transition, kind of the in-between between the nicest and the lowest income, so kind of a mixture here. So we have some completed houses and some unfinished dwellings. So again, kind of that mixture that we see here in the middle. So that zone of maturity here closest to the downtown area, then the in situ accretion, and then on the outside, this peripheral squatter settlements. So this would again be the poorest of the populations, immigrants, but we have no public services in these areas. And that has led to what are called favelas. And so a little video here if you're interested in these. But essentially out here in this peripheral zone where we have the poorest and we don't have access to resources, excuse me, essentially what has happened is some of the individuals have actually used their own innovation. As you can see here, these electric lines that are going here. So definitely nothing up to code, but essentially they are in very unsafe, really, practices, but they are connecting into some of the other zones, trying to kind of steal their electricity or set up these little mini cities to where they have their own. Now it's not government controlled, but essentially these communities kind of coming together to create inhabitable spaces. And then this other picture here just kind of showing these zones. So we kind of have the outskirts, so what we think of kind of as ghettos or the slums. That's what these favelas are, and it's due to this urban development and not equally distributing that. But again, where we have the wealthiest and then the middle and then the poorest income, and those on the outside are just essentially left to themselves. Very little policing. Essentially, they kind of make their own rules, kind of come up with their own system of living that is outside of government regulation. And that wraps up our South America region.